Let's continue then to be in conversation with our political analysts around these particular elections. Of course, tomorrow is the main and the big day for the elections. I am in conversation with Professor Breakfast. And Prof, we were talking about, the importance of political parties making sure that their manifestos basically translate to service delivery. I mean, essentially, that's what we are talking about when we speak about elections. What we are hearing on the ground from our reporters is the fact that they want to see political parties actually delivering. But then the question remains, especially for these elections, in the event of a coalition government, which is highly likely at this point, what happens to the bread and butter issues that our South Africans are facing?
I think the challenge that we have is that South Africa doesn't have a long-standing history of coalition arrangements. So the first coalition arrangement that rose to prominence was in the early 1900s. And then the second one was in 1933. And then after that, the National Party dominated the political landscape until the ANC rose to power. So we don't have a lot of experience on that score. But I think the evidence that we have is that one-party dominance is a thing of the past. And the possibility that the ANC might lose power is not far-fetched. But the challenge that we have with regard to coalition formations is that they are unstable and unworkable because we don't have a framework that guides them. If you look at, for instance, where they come from in Eastern Europe, political parties have a longer period to negotiate. But in South Africa, if you look at the constitutional provisions, they only have 2 weeks, 14 days, which is not enough. So I think we need to bridge those gaps if we want to make them flourish.
And there's two things you mentioned there, the time frame following the elections, that 2-week period. I want to touch on that, but in a moment. I mean, we've seen, as you've said, other countries that have made it work. Germany, of course, being one of those countries that has been flagged. Why is it difficult then for, South Africa? I mean, we've seen it, local government not really working. We've seen what it's done in big metros, particularly in the Gauteng province. Why is it that it's not working? Is it because political parties still have that political parties first and then South Africans second?
The challenge is that coalition arrangements are not a byproduct of a democracy. People don't vote for coalition arrangements. They vote for political parties. Political parties decide without the knowledge of the people who voted for them, who they want to join forces with, which is undemocratic. So I think also we need to close that gap. But I think we have no choice. We are all in this thing together as a country. But I think the challenge is that there have been a lot of musical chairs. People not discussing the model of development that needs to be implemented to improve the lives of the people for the better.
I think which also puts a burden a little bit on people, saying, I'd like to vote for political party A, but now I have the added burden to see who they are likely to be in alliance with and what do those policies say, how do I interpret those policies in order for me to get a job, as you've mentioned, of course, that we're still sitting with this high unemployment rates.
For instance, the DA has reached out to the ANC that it wants to join forces with the ANC. But then the ideological proximity of the DA is not closer to that of the ANC.
Absolutely.
So I might have voted for the DA, but I don't want them to join forces. So that's the problem. So after there is no outright winner, do political parties go back to their constituencies that gave them the mandate?
Now, Prof, you touched on the 2-week. The time frame in which political parties need to then start negotiating, after the elections and then obviously coming into an agreement. What happens after the voting has been counted? There is no outright winner. What are we likely to see? I
don't want to say that we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The issue is that I think the founding fathers of our democracy or the formulators of our constitution, they had in mind only the ANC. It never crossed their minds that at some point the ANC will be ousted out of power. So that's the challenge. So I think maybe there is a need to refine the constitution because as it stands, I don't think that it is up to scratch in this regard.
And you mentioned something about the founding fathers not having that consideration that we will be faced with this challenge. And I say we very carefully because, South Africans have also seen the ANC in power for the past 30 years, In the event of that happening, what is to happen to this party that we have come to know as the Liberating Party since 1994?
I think the political longevity of liberation movements in post-colonial states, it tends to be affected by institutionalization of a corruption. And the same goes to what is happening at Southern African region. If you look at, for instance, the decline of Frelimo in Mozambique, the decline of ZANU PF in Zimbabwe, the decline of SWAPO, those are the only liberation movements that we have at the moment. Others, they fell apart because of this particular issue. So the ANC is no exception. You know, I think it has been dealt with a blow in a big way by corruption. No wonder we've had the Zondo commission to uncover the truth about what had happened. And also the other argument is that normally the lifespan of liberation movements is normally 30 years.
Wow. A smack on the money.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we look at the fact that this has been a potential crisis that the ANC has been facing for quite some time, quite frankly, and in the lead up to this election, did they do enough?
I think they tried their level best to pitch their message to the relevant audience. You see, my view is that political power comes from two spaces in post-colonial states, namely the rural section of the population and the urban centers. So my prediction is that the ANC will do well in urban centers. In rural areas. However, where it will be dealt with a blow, it is in urban centers. Like for instance, in Gauteng, it will lose Gauteng. I can bet my bottom dollar. It will lose KZN, but it will win the Eastern Cape because of the large portion of the rural section of the population.
Prof, before I let you go, we've spoken, of course, about, the ANC and what possibly could happen now, notwithstanding, of course, the surveys that we've seen and the polls that have put them below 50%, some well below 45%. What about the opposition parties? I mean, the opposition parties that we are seeing now that have been with the ANC neck and neck for some time now, are not doing necessarily much better, are not necessarily capitalizing on what we are currently seeing with the ANC.
On a lighter note about research, you must remember the quality of research depends on the methodology. So it's not like those surveys, they went throughout the length and the breadth of the country asking each and everyone. But anyway, so I take those findings with a pinch of salt. But of late, we have seen a major shake-up in the campaign of the ANC with the big names that have come through. So a lot can happen, even from today until tomorrow. So I don't think that we must rule out these possibilities. But there is no opposition party that can dislodge the ANC by itself. Even the Moonshot Pact, I don't think that combined they can remove the ANC from power. That's why even the DA has reached out to the ANC.
Prof, let's leave it there for now, but of course we will be seeing you throughout the week. There's a lot to unpack and of course a lot to break down in a lead up, of course, to the main elections and the main voting that is happening tomorrow. Well, from me right here at the National Results Operations Center of the IEC in Midrand, it's back to you, Alicia, in studio.